Welcome everyone, and thank you for being with us for our food insecurity presentation and panel. Today we will hear from our panelists on how they define food insecurity, what brought them to their work, how you can become involved in fighting hunger in our community, and more. Before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about Chicago Hopes for Kids and the work that we do. Chicago Hopes for Kids strives to encourage our students through literacy-based programming. By offering school support as well as after-school programming, we are able to connect with our students. At the end of the panel, we will talk a little bit more about how to get involved with our organization, and I'll also be sending a link tomorrow so that everyone who wants to can get signed up for our newsletter or sign up to volunteer if they'd like to. Following the guest speaker and panel, we'll leave the last 10 minutes for a Q&A. But feel free to put any questions that come up during the discussion in the chat, and we will get to them. So yeah, I'm so excited to introduce you all to this amazing group of people. We have a really stacked house today. So let's begin with a little background on each of them. I'm going to share my screen, and they've provided some bios. Okay. So Elaine Waxman is a senior fellow in the Income and Benefits Policy Center at the Urban Institute and co-director of the Institute's From Safety Net to Solid Ground initiative. Her expertise includes food insecurity, nutrition, the food assistance safety net, and social determinants of health disparities, as well as broader issues affecting low-income families and communities. Recent projects include analysis of changes in food insecurity during the COVID-19 pandemic, a multi-site evaluation of healthier food access interventions in a diverse array of urban and rural communities across the US, including projects in Native communities, an analysis of the impact of geographic variations in food prices on SNAP benefit and adequacy, assessment of food insecurity and unmet food needs in Alameda County, California, a study of implementation challenges in the pandemic EBT program, and a multi-year evaluation using participant surveys and interviews to assess a home-delivered food box intervention that serves households with children, including families in Native communities in multiple states. Prior to joining the Institute, Waxman served for 6 years as the Vice President of Research and Nutrition at Feeding America, where she oversaw research on food insecurity and nutrition, federal nutrition programs, the intersection of hunger and health, and the circumstances and experiences of individuals seeking charitable food assistance. Waxman has co-authored numerous research and policy reports and articles in scholarly journals, including a recent article on SNAP benefit adequacy in the Agricultural and Resource Economics Review, which received the journal's Best Paper Award in 2019. Congratulations. She received her MPP and her PhD in Social Service Administration from the University of Chicago, where she is currently a lecturer. Our next panelist is Kathleen Valdez. As program coordinator, Kathleen focuses on engaging Chicago residents in the local circular economy, coordinating Plant Chicago's farmers markets, and facilitating select educational programs, including special events and workshops. Before working at Plant Chicago, Kathleen received her bachelor's in architecture with a minor in art history from Florida Atlantic University. During this time, she also worked with architect and artist Michael Singer and learned more about sustainability and passive design strategies. Moving to Chicago, she found a job at Gethsemane Garden Center, where she learned about community building and working for a small family business. Through 2020, she earned a certification in urban horticulture from Chicago Botanic Gardens Horticultural Branch, Windy City Harvest Apprenticeship Program. To have a further impact on Chicago's issues with food injustice, she, as co-founder, started Bridge and Blooms Farms, LLC. And if you guys are interested in Plant Chicago's farmers market, which you should be because it's excellent, we table there about like every other week. So if you aren't able to sign up as a volunteer with the form that we'll send tomorrow, that's another way. And then our final panelist, last but not least, is Frida Hawley. Frida is currently a board member for board member at Chicago Hopes for Kids and at SUCASA Central American Martyrs. For the past 30 years, Frida has founded, managed, and facilitated Frida's Place, a neighborhood soup kitchen located in the New City Englewood community. Frida aspires to help those experiencing homelessness gain the necessities of living a normal life, including permanent shelter, food, and clothing. Her 3 sons, 3 college degrees, and Frida's Place are some accomplishments that bring her great joy. Frida is a person who has a heart full of love and happiness and wants to share it with whomever crosses her path. So we have a really excellent and diverse array of people here today to talk about this really important topic. And I think we're going to start out with a presentation from Elaine that will give us a little bit of background before we get into the Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, and it's so great to see all of you. Um, I do work for the Urban Institute. Sorry for that incredibly long formal bio that they usually have us put together. But I actually live in Chicago and have been in Chicago for more than 30 years. I live in the East Riders Park neighborhood. And so probably my most relevant experiences are having volunteered with food pantries, with the Food Depository, and with mutual aid in Riders Park. But today, my role is to give you a little bit bigger picture about food insecurity. I'm going to talk a little bit about what has happened during the pandemic nationally with respect to food insecurity and how it has affected different communities, a little bit about what we know about data specifically in Chicago, and some things to just keep in mind as you're talking about the conditions on the ground and the initiatives that are working to respond to that. So I'm going to share a few slides. Don't be overwhelmed by data and numbers. They're really just an anchor for a conversation. So we'll treat it really informally. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to raise your hand or just pop in. Okay, so I'm going to, a second, I need to figure out how to move this around. Okay, great. Okay, so I think many of you on the call have a sense of what we mean by food insecurity. You may yourself have experienced it or worked with families who struggle to put an adequate diet on the table on a regular basis. That's basically what it means. But here I'm giving you an example of some of the formal questions that are asked, the way we measure food insecurity nationally and across states is in the current population survey that the census runs. There's a module of 18 questions, only 10 if you don't have kids in your house. And they run the gamut from, sort of the initial anxiety about running out of money for food and not being able to buy more, to the most severe conditions, such as having a child in the household who could not eat for a full day because you couldn't afford enough food. And so that is when we provide food insecurity estimates. It's the responses to those questions. And if you have at least 3 responses, we consider you food insecure. And we also refer to something as very low food security, which is when you're experiencing multiple instances of those more significant conditions. But regardless of where you fall on that spectrum, food insecurity is not good for people. It's not good for people emotionally, and it's not good for people physically. And I just quickly here put a list together of all of the ways that food insecurity is associated with other health risks. And this is something I think a lot of times people aren't aware of, in that we really need to think of food insecurity as a public health problem. Sometimes people talk about it as if it's a social welfare problem, but it's a public health problem, and it is associated with a lot of very concerning health conditions. Anything from complications with asthma, being at a higher risk for diabetes, obviously not being able to manage diabetes very well if you're food insecure. I know you're talking about kids. One of the things we see is developmental delays in children. Among teens, we see a greater incidence of mood disorders and actually greater suicidal ideation. So there are all kinds of reasons why we should be concerned about it. And I think over time, we will also understand the ways in which food insecurity may have aggravated COVID outcomes, but we don't really have visibility to all of that yet. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through some of the trends that we saw nationally from the start of the pandemic. And what you can see is what I know we all observed and experienced, which is in March of 2020, with the immediate shutdown of the economy and the jump in unemployment, we saw a jump of food insecurity initially. About a quarter of all families with kids reporting food insecurity at that time, about 1 in 5 adults generally. What's interesting is you see there's a dip there. When we surveyed again, this is a national survey that Urban runs. In May, we actually saw a little bit of an improvement. And we think what was going on there was, even though the economy was largely shut down, we had an infusion of resources, right? So we had stimulus checks, we had a boost to unemployment that started around that time. More people were availing themselves of SNAP. So, you know, it shows us, I think, that those things matter, right? And they improve. And then we saw it inching back up around September last year. And if you think back to what was going on then, stimulus checks had not been reissued, right? So people had mostly spent those. The unemployment boost expired at that time and hadn't been renewed. Kids were not back in school, and there had been a lot of delays in providing pandemic EBT, which was designed to provide the value of school meals on a benefits card. That was very slow coming. So I think we saw, again, that not having those buffers meant that it was inching back up. And we also learned a lot about how food insecurity wasn't being experienced consistently across communities. And this is probably not surprising to you, but I have to say that the magnitude of what we observed last September among these groups was pretty breathtaking to me, even having worked in this field for a long time. As I said, around that time, about a quarter of families with school-age kids were experiencing food insecurity, but more than a third of households that had reported losing some kind of work or work-related income, maybe they had reduced hours, even if they kept their job, were experiencing food insecurity. And that was a much more dramatic impact than if someone was, you know, navigating the challenges of the pandemic, but had been able to hang on to their jobs. And then the particularly disturbing disparities are what we see among communities of color. And that's not new, right? We came into the pandemic with a long history and current experience of structural racism and disparities, but the pandemic fell particularly hard on communities of color. Here, I'm only able to report Black and Latinx, but you'll see that they were more than doubled, almost tripled sometimes of what white households were experiencing. And this is specifically a snapshot of families with school-age kids. That's really worrisome because kids are obviously in a period of development. And so you're laying down a health infrastructure, if you will, that serves them not just right now, but that can carry forward into their future. So that was really troubling. So the good news is, when we repeated the surveys this spring, food insecurity had fallen quite a bit. It had fallen about 30% between last spring and this spring. It's still above pre-pandemic levels. So it's not as if we're out of the woods, but at least we've seen some improvement. Again, part of that, I think, is the story about improvements in the kinds of assistance we've been offering people this spring. So we had 2 more rounds of stimulus checks, or recovery rebates, as they were called most recently. SNAP benefits as of January were boosted at the maximum level by 15%. That carries through till September. There was a re-upping of the boost in unemployment benefits, although that is beginning to drop off in some states and will be discontinued by September everywhere. So we've had good news. I'm a little worried that because a lot of the benefits are temporary in nature and maybe coming to a close this fall, that we might see another one of those inflections like we saw before. So I think we're just going to have to keep a very close eye and help people be aware of the fact that this is a long haul story. It's not when the economy opens up or when kids go back to school that things are suddenly magically, because families have dug themselves into quite a hole trying to cope during the pandemic. And again, it's very important that even though that we saw quite a bit of progress by this spring, we still see quite a bit of disparities among groups. In particular, one of the things that we noticed this spring is that while, for example, food insecurity among Black families had come down quite a bit, again, not equivalent to white households, but quite a significant improvement. We did not see that in Latinx households. it was better, but still persistently high. And I think there's a few things going on there. One is mixed status households who may not qualify for all of the benefits, or because of the recently hostile immigration climate and shifting rules around what we call public charge during the Trump administration, families who might even have been eligible for benefits were shying away from them because of concerns about what that would mean for their families. We also know that Latinx families were particularly hard hit with respect to employment issues. So I think, again, these are things that we need to continue to lift up and talk about as we think about how to move forward. I started to say, as the pandemic eases, I'm not even sure we're at that point yet, but hopefully. Okay, so how does this translate into Cook County? You know, the problem with food insecurity data is that we always have a lag. So what we have here for 2021 are projections. We saw in 2019, you know, we still had about 1 in 11 residents who were food insecure. When you think about how many people are in Cook County, you know, that's literally hundreds of thousands of people. And it was about 1 in 8 for kids coming in before the pandemic. Feeding America has done a series of estimates based on the way we know food insecurity trends move when unemployment changes. And what we're estimating now is about 1 in 6 kids food insecure this year, about 1 in 9 residents overall. So again, that's a little bit of a guess. What we know is that it's higher than it was before the pandemic. What we also learned from the Great Recession is that it takes a long time to get past those economic shocks. It took us 10 years to get back to the pre-Great Recession levels of food insecurity. So it wasn't until 2018 that we had actually gotten back to where we were before the Great Recession. And, you know, we don't know exactly what this recovery will look like, but I think, again, we need to know that this is a long haul investment that we're talking about. So one other thing that I want to leave you with in thinking about different kinds of responses, you're going to, I think, talk more about responses on the ground, which are so critical. But one of our primary lines of defense for food insecurity is the SNAP program, or what was formerly known as food stamps. And during the pandemic, as I said, the benefits for SNAP have been boosted, but that's temporary. What we had done a few years ago at Urban was actually look at what a maximum SNAP benefit per meal was. This was from 2018, so it was $1.86 was the per meal maximum benefit. Maximum benefit is available for people who are deemed to have no income available for food purchases. But the average cost of a moderately priced meal in Chicago was actually $2.26. And so you can see that coming into the pandemic, SNAP was never adequate to really cover people's costs. And we can imagine that this is not all that surprising in Chicago, but it actually was true of 99% of counties in the US that SNAP fell short. So even in rural areas, different kinds of states, this has been a chronic problem. We're about to release later this week an update to this with 2020 costs. And what we know is that it still doesn't meet the costs in 96% of US counties. Even when you add on the 15%, that helps a lot. But that means that 40% of US counties still have a shortfall. So this is also a long-term issue, which is addressing the adequacy of SNAP to make it be a more meaningful benefit and to help people's grocery shopping, you know, stretch further, so that when they are turning to food pantries or mutual aid or other resources in the community, they've maximized what they can in terms of their own resources and federal benefits, and the community can come around that and help fill in those holes. So I'm going to stop there. That's a lot of information, but I hope that I leave you with the sense that, you know, things are a little bit more hopeful they are still not back to where we were before the pandemic. And how you're experiencing this is very much driven by where you live, the community that you come from, and the ongoing gaps that we have in the responses that we have had in place. So I will look forward to hearing from my colleagues on the panel and any questions that you have going forward.
Thank you so much, Elaine. That was so interesting. And I feel like I learned a lot just from like your presentation, let alone the Q&A we're about to get into. So the Q&A is actually going to be moderated by our panel facilitators, Eileen Shea and Kenna Ziegler. Both are AmeriCorps state and national members with Chicago Hopes for Kids this summer and have been doing a great job. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to them to ask a few questions, and then we'll get into the questions in the chat. I also received a message from Kathleen that Zach will be joining our panel or just helping us answer some of these questions, and that he also does work in food insecurity. So if you want to introduce yourself very briefly, feel free.
Yes, sorry. I'm Zachary Austin. So currently, right now, I work with Growing Home as a farm and program associate. So we do a lot of education here, as well as, a majority of our food is diverted to Inglewood, as well as some larger contracts with Catholic charities, as well as with the Greater Chicago Food Depository. I've been growing here in Chicago for some time, as far as this production size, but I've been growing on my own for about 8 years. And as far as educationally, my education background is in anthropology with a focus in food. So yeah, I love food, love talking about it. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you all for being here. We're very excited to hear from our panelists. So I'll go ahead with the first question, and panelists, feel free to just jump in, unmute yourself whenever you feel called to answer. So the first question is, how have you seen food insecurity in Chicago evolve over the years, especially during COVID? And I know that Elaine gave us a good overview of the impact during COVID, but please feel free to add your own experiences and speak toward how you've seen it evolve in general over your career.
I guess I'll start it off. By me running a soup kitchen, you get to see the people first on, as things are happening. And before COVID, the food insecurity was really bad. If the kids didn't go to school, there was no lunch or breakfast for them to eat. And they wondered if they would even had dinner to eat. But in my soup kitchen, we're open 3 days a week, and we serve breakfast on Tuesday and Thursday and lunch on Sundays. And we would get these kids in, and once we feed them, we would also try to prepare a bag of groceries for them to take home to make sure they had something to eat for the days that we weren't open. And it was really bad. But as the pandemic started progressing, it started getting a little better as they started getting the like she mentioned, the stipends, and then came the food stamp increase. But before that, they would even have to sell some of their food stamps to help pay their rent. So when they did go grocery shopping, they didn't have enough that would last them throughout the month. So they would have to venture out to food pantries or soup kitchens such as mine or other places to try and eat. But our numbers did drop a little bit, which is a good thing whenever you don't have to come out to a soup kitchen or to a food pantry. But it didn't last long, because now you still in jeopardy because you can't pay your rent. You still have other things you need to do. And if your income is over a certain $1 of an amount that the Illinois Department of Human Services say you have to have it, then you don't qualify for those food stamps, because you make $1 more than what they say your household limit should be. And now you're back at your food pantries and soup kitchens trying to get food. So then I started seeing pop-up gardens. People started doing gardens in their backyard. I even set up a little garden in the soup kitchen. So it started helping a lot, because the people could come and get those vegetables and go home and prepare meals from that. They started giving out food boxes just randomly on corners and in different places, which was a big help for communities like the one that I'm in. I'm in the New City / Inglewood community, and those food boxes and those food pantries and soup kitchens were a really big help, and especially the food depository, because they stopped, they used to give you food like maybe 7 cents on a pound or for the boxes when you go in and volunteer, whatever, and they started giving it for free. And it helped me get a lot of more food in to where I could make more bags and give a lot of food out. So the food insecurities during the pandemic got better as far as from what I've seen. Now, who's to say what's going to happen once these things, that the benefits that they're giving out stop, how it's going to be. And we still are getting a lot of people out now because it's not good, but it did get a little better, as she was showing on her charts. And I agree with everything that she was showing on those charts, because that is exactly how it is in that community. So like I said, I hope that things like this continue, especially the gardens and the food boxes. I know the stamps are not going to continue, but it has benefited the parents a lot in those communities.
In response to that, I would like to let you guys know that I'm actually not from Chicago. I moved to Chicago 3 years ago, and I kind of came into the food industry and into this world of food insecurity in the past year and a half, when both my parents were diagnosed with cancer and their entire diet changed because one of them was going through chemo. So that's in the process of me doing research. I kind of just got more connected to the city through community gardens and urban growing practices. And I kind of changed my whole profession and did a 180 into something that's more meaningful and that I'm more passionate about. But from the past 3 years, or the past year and a half, and the past year that I've learned about urban agriculture and becoming more connected, I noticed that there was a huge response from the city, as both Freda and Eileen mentioned. There was love fridges evolved in the past year, and a lot of organizations, communities, and churches are getting connected and establishing those within their communities to make sure that families have access to fresh food. Here at Plant Chicago, we started a CSA box program and connected with another organization, Urban Canopy, to make sure that people have access to the box of food that has bread, eggs, and other vegetables that can be purchased with a link card or on a sliding scale for people who don't have access to a link card. And we also have been running a farmers market for a long time that accepts link, but through 2020, there was different grants accessible for our organization to have better access to food, to provide better access to food to the community and those who need it the most. But as mentioned, we don't really know how this is going to transition moving forward. Hopefully, it's some of these transitions have created awareness in the communities and realized that this is not just a 2020 response. This is actually like something that's happening around us, has been happening around us, and we do just need to make sure that these grants are still accessible so that we can still continue to provide food to people through farmers markets, urban gardens, and so on.
I've heard of the love fridges. We recently just put one outside of my place, and that has been a wonderful benefit for the communities, because they can come to those refrigerators any time of the day or night and get whatever food is in there. And I think that is really awesome. I don't know who created it, but it's a wonderful idea they done.
I'm trying to remember the name of it. One of our interns did a little bit of research on it, but we were considering to open one, but then we did the research and there's over 5 love fridges within a 5-mile radius of our site. So we said, as long as we are donating food from our farmers markets to the fridges, I think it's still pretty accessible to the community.
Originally, Risa from the Love Fridge was supposed to be on this panel, but she unfortunately had to drop out because she's going back to her day job today. But I think they have a somewhat decentralized structure. It's kind of I know little free libraries are kind of a corporate thing and you have to pay a lot of money to have one, but I think they aren't as centralized and try to help but don't don't like monetize it in any way, which is really cool.
Well, I'll just, put my experience in there as far as how things were before, the COVID situation and after. I would definitely say as far as like the stigma of hunger or the stigma of not necessarily having enough money month to month has definitely been altered by a collective experience of insecurity or, brushes with poverty, or, it's more understood, or I should say the figures that you had showed, Elaine, were somewhat surprising in that, I guess maybe surprising to some people that these, safety net programs actually work, that they actually, in fact, are solving the problems that they're intended to. It's not attached to some other spike in something that is unexpected. I mean, you put more money into this, and then yes, now folks are, have greater caloric security. So that's not that. I hope the right people are looking at it and getting the right things from it, I guess is what that makes you feel, or that's my hope. And I think that it's kind of grounded. I would hopefully say, at least for America, I can only speak on America, or speak in Chicago and Evanston, where I'm from. It feels a lot more grounded in reality, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, I'm sorry that all this has happened, but I think that's one highlight to take away from it, that no one's above being hungry. I mean, it's a biological fact. So I could just say that. I mean, I'm really glad that I've been growing throughout my life and really use that to supplement my food or my, day-to-day costs. So I hope everyone continues doing that. I know it's definitely made seeds more expensive. It's made equipment more expensive for growing, but that's something I can take.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear how people and organizations have adapted to all the unknowns of COVID. And so our next question, again, open to all the panelists. So what would you share with those who have never heard of food insecurity or have never had to be food insecure?
I mean, I would just like for them to know that it is real, because some people doesn't even believe that it's, and it happens. And I've had women come to my kitchen with little babies that they can't even keep with the formula, and having to rush to the hospital just for them to get fed. And this is like close to starvation, it's really serious out there. And what Zachary said, I hope that the right people, see that the increase in the benefits has helped, and the help that it is doing. And once this pandemic ends, don't put these people back in those spots, in those bad situations. It's just see that it's real and it happens, and increase in benefit helps.
I guess I would like to share, this is just from my realm and my focus, like right at the beginning of this situation, we had the whole breakdown of, logistic chains as far as shipping the food to where it needs to go. And so a lot of food was wasted, just dumped in fields, put in trenches, however the farmers had to deal with it. But, it's just an odd kind of paradox that a lot of farmers, honestly are going hungry. A lot of farmers are locked into just growing onions or just, raising dairy cattle or whatever it may be. And then, once these chains get broken down, just because no matter how close you are to a food source, if you aren't really treating it as a diversified product, food that is, if you're just treating it as a commodity and, experiencing your own personal economy as that, just living off of a commodity of a food, then you are without a doubt insecure. It only takes, some shipments to not make it for you to not get paid. Or it only takes, a shift in the farm bill to affect what your guaranteed cost is going to be per pound or whatever. So I think there's, a misconception that, if you're a farmer, you'll probably be good. Or, if you work at a restaurant, I don't know, like if you're really close to the source, then you're probably okay. But that isn't always the case. I think that's how people kind of get a handle on that. It really comes down to you being in control of where your food comes from, not your proximity. Food deserts are a thing for sure. So that's why I stress your own control aspect. Like That's something that I think is a misnomer as far as, folks at farm or rural America, that they're probably good, but that's usually not the case.
I guess I agree. I completely agree with both of you guys. There is communities within communities that are food insecure that don't realize that they themselves might be insecure because they don't have the access to good quality food within their own area, or communities that they don't know. Like, I've been living in a food desert my whole life and they didn't realize that that was considered a food desert. So food insecurity just has like many ways it can go through. Like, just because you're close to access to food doesn't mean that you have access to it. And overall, I think it's just making sure that we're having those discussions, like having conversations such as this one, so that people are more comfortable to share their personal stories and we can connect with the community and let them know about our needs. And I think overall, like, this past year kind of raised a lot of awareness because everyone was dealing with the issue. And it wasn't just based on what area you're from. Like, grocery stores were empty. Everyone had to deal with it. It doesn't matter if you have money in your bank account or not. Grocery stores were just overall empty because everyone was hoarding, over hoarding. And then like 2 weeks later, your food is bad. What are you gonna do with it? You can't cook with the food that you bought 2 weeks ago because it's now spoiled. So everyone had to address it and deal with it, but it's just like making sure that we continue to have the conversation so that they don't forget that happened. 2 years down the line, kids will forget, and we'll have to like readdress the issue. But if we just keep the conversation going, sharing our stories in spaces like this, we can make a difference.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. Those are definitely important points and a lot of info that is to be considered for those who don't really know about food insecurity or have just a vague understanding, especially the ultimate point where it's like, this is something that's very real and happens to a lot of people that you may not realize. And just having these conversations are really important. So thank you. So our next question is, what resources currently exist and how can community members become involved in combating food insecurity in Chicago, whether that be with your organization or in general?
Well, one of the main resources in Chicago is the Greater Chicago Food Depository, which they have recently announced that that you can still order food for free throughout 2022. Which is a awesome thing to do when it comes to soup kitchen and pantries and other places who order food from them. That gives you the opportunity to order as much as you need to feed as many people as you can reach, and to give them groceries as far as taking home. The gardens, the pop-up gardens, they're offering the free vegetables, once they harvest, to the people in their communities and things like that. Or as far as volunteers coming out, when volunteers come out, you're helping people by preparing meals for them, bagging up their groceries for them, just giving your time to them. Monetary donations is so much out there that you can do, and you just got to put your ear to the ground and learn what's going on and what community or areas needed, and ask. And I'm quite sure they'll let you know just where you can jump in at and help. Because as far as me having a soup kitchen, I still want to go outside that and help other organizations as they are with me. As far as Trader Joe's give us food every Sunday to help feed people. Generous organizations such as Chicago Host for Kids, they help other people outside of their organization. It's just an ongoing thing, and a lot of these resources people don't know about. So far as networking and getting that information out there to others would be a great resource within itself.
I would like to point out that there are many organizations in Chicago that are making a difference towards addressing food insecurity. Zach and I graduated from the Windy City Harvest program to learn about urban agriculture in the end of last year. and they have been addressing food insecurity for over 7, almost 10 years. They have 17 urban farms in Chicago, and a good majority of them are community gardens. And this whole staff team at the Botanic Gardens maintain the gardens. So community members just have to go in and join in, and they have access to free food, free or affordable fresh fruits and vegetables. As a response to that, I also started my own farming business called Bridge and Bloom this year, and all of it is designed to be on a sliding scale. And I also work for Plant Chicago, and we have internships for students. Some of them are paid, or most of them are just for the experience. In Plant Chicago, we have the farmers market, the CSA Bucks program. We also have an indoor and outdoor victory garden, which is designed for people to learn about growing completely. Well, the outdoor farm space is free, but the indoor farm space is like dependent. It's currently under construction. But basically, if you want to learn about aquaponics, hydroponics, or any indoor farming practices, we have the space and the equipment, and we just need to get connected with community members, students, young adults that want to learn about it. And once we have that connection, we can seek the grants and move forward with these projects. The more involved we are with you guys, the better access you guys have to like resources that you need, and the better it is for us to move forward with projects that we have in mind. But yeah, there's many organizations that are doing the same things as us, and we are connected to them. So if you're ever looking for something, just reach out to us. We have a large network of organizations that care about supporting the community with food, education, and different things.
Yeah, so, as far as, I just encourage people to look right around in their area within, a 10-block radius of wherever they live at, and really try to start there. Here in Inglewood, at Growing Home, we have, volunteers weekly, and, it's really great to get on site, get your hands dirty and be part of the process. And, we're certainly open to that and scheduling that. For, just, I guess, with my thought process about it, it's like I really want folks to realize that they can help in more ways than just growing or just like weeding, or there's a whole entire structures of from you take the plate or from wherever it's being grown at. Like there's whether it be the wholesaler, or whether it be someone who's actually driving it there, or whether it be someone who's just got a stand or a space that can be used to distribute places. I mean, like there's just a lot of layers to just eating food comfortably, that kind of get forgotten. People just, think of the grocery store model, which is really what, as we're combating, and what has kind of got us into this dependency issue in the first place. So if we're becoming more integral in the process without, growing is great, come down, get dirty, pull things out the ground, fantastic. But for folks who have other skills, I would say like try to train them towards how can I accelerate or ease the movement of food from a farm to a table. Don't get too pigeonholed in where it is that you can really help. Just really use your strengths, in that regard. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and if I could just add one thing that I think everybody can contribute to, which is to make your voice heard. At the federal level, at the state level, because as we've talked about, lo and behold, these government programs work. They make a difference, and then they enable people to have the resources they need to do the things that they want to do with their lives. And we need to make it abundantly clear to policymakers that the SNAP increase should be permanent. There should be a permanent solution for addressing the inadequacy of SNAP. I would love to see universal school meals. We have that right now. They've waived the requirements so that everyone can get school meals, but we should just have that going forward. We shouldn't have that situation where your family is a few dollars above the cutoff for free and reduced price lunch and you can't afford that. So Greater Chicago Food Depository is a place that you can sign up for advocacy alerts, and they can let you know when things are moving. There are other organizations that do that as well, but that takes 5 minutes of your time, and any voice that's added to that is also really important.
Yes, thank you for sharing all of those ways people can get involved. We really appreciate all the work you guys do to provide resources and advocate for this issue. So now we want to just open it up to the audience for any questions. You can unmute or put them in the chat.
I don't have a question, just more so a comment. Hi, my name's Kim. I am a volunteer coordinator, Vista here at Hopes. And I love all the workshops, but this one really was eye-opening. Because I understand food insecurity, but this just really like seeing the statistics and hearing people who are really trying to work to make a difference, similar to us at Hopes, just understand the intersections of how all of this comes, together with these issues. I just want to thank you all for just shedding light and just opening my eyes and just showing me ways I can continue to get more involved within Chicago. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you for that comment, Kim. Does anybody else have any questions? If not, we have a final question that we can introduce to you guys. And I know that Elaine and Kathleen both expressed that they might have to hop off a little early, and that's totally fine. Thank you so much for participating and coming. Like, this has been very eye-opening for me as well.
I would just like to say to Elaine, your graphs gave a good eye view of what was really going on. It's one thing to sit and talk about it, but it's another thing to see the charts and see how it's really going. And to Zachary, can you give more information how someone can come in and volunteer and help with your organization?
Yeah, sure. So you'll be able to find LaQuandra's information on our website, and she really is the volunteer coordinator. Typically, volunteers are here Monday and Thursday in the mornings. But of course, we can accommodate whatever schedule that folks have available. We also have a farmers market on 59th and Honoree every Thursday. So if you're in the area, it's between 11:30 and 5 on Thursdays. Beyond that, there's definitely, I would say, keep an eye out for what's going on in Inglewood. I mean, there's a few projects that are going on that are outside of us. A market that's supposed to be permanent over on 63rd. That's coming along. So yeah, there's just kind of a lot of things bubbling. So I would say just keep an eye on Rage or Grow Greater Inglewood. They're all here in the area, focused on similar projects.
And if I could just piggyback on what Frida said, I think what's really powerful is a combination of data and personal stories. Like, each of those things bring something important, and they're even more powerful when you can put them together so that people can understand the breadth of the issue and the ways in which it shows up in different communities. But there's no substitute for being able to talk about what it looks like on the ground and what families are struggling with. And so as researchers, that's something that we're also always trying to find to round out those graphs. This week, I'm actually doing interviews with families about the new child tax credit. I don't know if you all knew about that, but starting in July, at least through the end of this year, there's a monthly payment for families with kids. It's roughly $300 a month. It varies a little bit depending on the age of the kid. But one of the things we're looking is to see whether that can be a transformative thing for families in terms of being able to cover their basic expenses. And if so, then we want to tell that story, right? Both in terms of data and individual experiences, so that that can be made permanent, because right now that will expire at the end of this year.
Elaine, and if, like you said, greater in numbers using our voices, if anything ever get going far as, going toward the senators and congressmen and things like that, please share that information so that we all can join in on that, because I do believe we're greater in voices and numbers.
Okay, and I think unless anyone has anything to add, I think that will conclude our presentation for today. I'll give you guys a few minutes of your Tuesday back, but thank you so much to everyone who participated, everyone who came. Yeah, such an important topic, and so good to learn more. All right.
I want to thank Chicago. I want to thank Chicago hosts for doing this. I mean, these are some great people, and I really want to network with these guys. It's just wonderful. Thank y'all so much for doing this.
Thank you, Frida. You're always such a light in our presentations and in Frida's place. And yeah, if anyone is looking for a volunteer opportunity, I've been to the Greater Chicago Food Depository and it's great, but Frida's place is a wonderful soup kitchen to work out of. Okay, so everyone have a lovely Tuesday. We'll see you soon.